Lesson 15, Tolerance. Welcome to Lesson 15. Today's lesson focuses on tolerance, the ability to understand, respect, and work with different perspectives. Open-mindedness is often a hidden key to growth and leadership. At DigitalShelf.ca, you'll find a diverse range of voices, ideas, and programs because we believe that learning from many perspectives is what builds truly well-rounded leaders. Let's begin. I'll see you inside the lesson. Happy learning.
The gift of finding joy everywhere and of leaving it behind them everywhere they go. Faber. The law of success. Lesson 15, Tolerance. You can do it if you believe you can. There are two significant features about intolerance, and your attention is directed to these at the beginning of this lesson. These features are: first, intolerance is a form of ignorance which must be mastered before any form of enduring success may be attained. It is the chief cause of all wars. It makes enemies in business and in the professions. It disintegrates the organized forces of society in 1,000 forms and stands like a mighty giant as a barrier to the abolition of war. It dethrones reason and substitutes mob psychology in its place. Second, intolerance is the chief disintegrating force in the organized religions of the world, where it plays havoc with the greatest power for good there is on this earth, by breaking up that power into small sects and denominations, which spend as much effort opposing each other as they do in destroying the evils of the world. But this indictment against intolerance is general. Let's see how it affects you, the individual. It is, of course, obvious that anything which impedes the progress of civilization stands also as a barrier to each individual. And stating it conversely, anything that beclouds the mind of the individual and retards his mental, moral, and spiritual development retards also the progress of civilization. All of which is an abstract statement of a great truth. And inasmuch as abstract statements are neither interesting nor highly informative, let us proceed to illustrate more concretely the damaging effects of intolerance. I will begin this illustration by describing an incident which I have mentioned quite freely in practically every public address that I have delivered within the past 5 years. But, inasmuch as the cold printed page has a modifying effect, which makes possible the misinterpretation of the incident here described, I believe it necessary to caution you not to read back of the lines a meaning which I had no intention of placing there. You will do yourself an injustice if you either neglect or intentionally refuse to study this illustration in the exact words and with the exact meaning which I have intended those words to convey, a meaning as clear as I know how to make the English language convey it. As you read of this incident, place yourself in my position and see if you also have not had a parallel experience, and if so, what lesson did it teach you? One day I was introduced to a young man of unusually fine appearance. His clear eye, his warm hand clasp, the tone of his voice, and the splendid taste with which he was groomed marked him as a young man of the highest intellectual type. He was of the typical young American college student type, and as I ran my eyes over him, hurriedly studying his personality, as one will naturally do under such circumstances, I observed a Knights of Columbus pin on his vest. Instantly, I released his hand as if it were a piece of ice. This was done so quickly that it surprised both him and me. As I excused myself and started to walk away, I glanced down at the Masonic pin that I wore on my own vest, then took another look at his Knights of Columbus pin, and wondered why a couple of trinkets such as these could dig such a deep chasm between men who knew nothing of each other. All the remainder of that day I kept thinking of the incident because it bothered me. I had always taken considerable pride in the thought that I was tolerant with all men, but here was a spontaneous outburst of intolerance, which proved that down in my subconscious mind existed a complex that was influencing me toward narrow-mindedness. This discovery so shocked me that I began a systematic process of psychoanalysis through which I searched into the very depths of my soul for the cause of my rudeness. I asked myself over and over again, why did you abruptly release that young man's hand and turn away from him when you knew nothing about him? Of course, the answer led me always back to that Knights of Columbus pin that he wore. But that was not a real answer, and therefore it did not satisfy me. Then I began to do some research work in the field of religion. I began to study both Catholicism and Protestantism until I had traced both back to their beginning, a line of procedure which I must confess brought me more understanding of the problems of life than I had gathered from all other sources. For one thing, it disclosed the fact that Catholicism and Protestantism differ more in form than they do in effect, that both are founded on exactly the same cause, which is Christianity. But this was by no means all, nor was it the most important of my discoveries, for my research led, of necessity, in many directions and forced me into the field of biology, where I learned much that I needed to know about life in general and the human being in particular. My research led also to the study of Darwin's hypothesis of evolution, as outlined in his Origin of Species, and this, in turn, led to a much wider analysis of the subject of psychology than that which I had previously made. As I began to reach out in this direction and that for knowledge, my mind began to unfold and broaden with such alarming rapidity that I practically found it necessary to wipe the slate of what I believed to be my previously gathered knowledge and to unlearn much that I previously believed to be truth. Comprehend the meaning of that which I have just stated. Imagine yourself suddenly discovering that most of your philosophy of life had been built of bias and prejudice, making it necessary for you to acknowledge that, far from being a finished scholar, you were barely qualified to become an intelligent student. That was exactly the position in which I found myself, with respect to many of what I believed to be sound fundamentals of life. But of all the discoveries to which this research led, none was more important than that of the relative importance of physical and social heredity, for it was this discovery that disclosed the cause for my action when I turned away from a man whom I did not know on the occasion that I have described. It was this discovery that disclosed to me how and where I acquired my views of religion, of politics, of economics, and many other equally important subjects. And I both regret and rejoice to state that I found most of my views on these subjects without support by even a reasonable hypothesis, much less sound facts or reason. I then recalled a conversation between the late Senator Robert L. Taylor and myself in which we were discussing the subject of politics. It was a friendly discussion, as we were of the same political faith, but the senator asked me a question for which I never forgave him until I began the research to which I have referred. "I see that you are a very staunch Democrat," said he, "and I wonder if you know why you are." I thought of the question for a few seconds, then blurted out this reply: "I am a Democrat because my father was one, of course." With a broad grin on his face, the senator then nailed me with this rejoinder: "Just as I thought. Now wouldn't you be in a bad fix if your father had been a horse thief? Hearts like doors can ope with ease to very, very little keys. And don't forget that they are these. I thank you, Sir 7, and if you please." L10. It was many years later, after I began the research work herein described, that I understood the real meaning of Senator Taylor's joke. Too often we hold opinions that are based upon no sounder foundation than that of what someone else believes. That you may have a detailed illustration of the far-reaching effects of one of the important principles uncovered by the incident to which I have referred, and that you may learn how and where you acquired your philosophy of life in general, that you may trace your prejudices and your biases to their original source, that you may discover, as I discovered, how largely you are the result of the training you received before you reached the age of 15 years. I will now quote the full text of a plan which I submitted to Mr. Edward Bach's committee, the American Peace Award, for the abolition of war. This plan covers not only the most important of the principles to which I refer, but, as you will observe, it shows how the principle of organized effort, as outlined in Lesson 2 of this course, may be applied to one of the most important of the world's problems, and at the same time gives you a more comprehensive idea of how to apply this principle in the attainment of your definite chief aim. 11. To abolish war. The background. Before offering this plan for the prevention of war, it seems necessary to sketch briefly a background that will clearly describe the principle which constitutes the warp and the woof of the plan. The causes of war may be properly omitted for the reason that they have but little, if any, relation to the principle through which war may be prevented. The beginning of this sketch deals with two important factors which constitute the chief controlling forces of civilization. One is physical heredity, and the other is social heredity. The size and form of the body, the texture of the skin, the color of the eyes, and the functioning power of the vital organs are all the result of physical heredity. They are static and fixed and cannot be changed, for they are the result of 1,000,000 years of evolution. But by far the most important part of what we are is the result of social heredity, and came to us from the effects of our environment and early training. Our conception of religion, politics, economics, philosophy, and other subjects of a similar nature, including war, is entirely the result of those dominating forces of our environment and training. The Catholic is a Catholic because of his early training, and the Protestant is a Protestant for the same reason. But this is hardly stating the truth with sufficient emphasis, or it might be properly said that the Catholic is a Catholic and the Protestant is a Protestant because he cannot help it. With but few exceptions, the religion of the adult is the result of his 12 religious training during the years between 4 and 14, when his religion was forced upon him by his parents or those who had control of his schooling. A prominent clergyman indicated how well he understood the principle of social heredity when he said, "Give me the control of the child until it is 12 years old, and you can teach it any religion you may please after that time. For I will have planted my own religion so deeply in its mind that no power on earth could undo my work." The outstanding and most prominent of man's beliefs are those which were forced upon him, or which he absorbed of his own volition under highly emotionalized conditions when his mind was receptive. Under such conditions, the evangelist can plant the idea of religion more deeply and permanently during an hour's revival service than he could through years of training under ordinary conditions when the mind was not in an emotionalized state. The people of the United States have immortalized Washington and Lincoln because they were the leaders of the nation during times when the minds of the people were highly emotionalized, as the result of calamities which shook the very foundation of our country and vitally affected the interests of all the people. Through the principle of social heredity, operating through the schools, American history, and through other forms of impressive teaching, the immortality of Washington and Lincoln is planted in the minds of the young and in that way kept alive. The three great organized forces through which social heredity operates are the schools, the churches, and the public press. 13. Any ideal that has the active cooperation of these three forces may, during the brief period of one generation, be forced upon the minds of the young so effectively that they cannot resist it. In 1914, the world awoke one morning to find itself aflame with warfare on a scale previously unheard of, and the outstanding feature of importance of that worldwide calamity was the highly organized German armies. For more than 3 years, these armies gained ground so rapidly that world domination by Germany seemed certain. The German military machine operated with efficiency such as had never before been demonstrated in warfare. With Kultur as her avowed ideal, modern Germany swept the opposing armies before her as though they were leaderless, despite the fact that the Allied forces outnumbered her own on every front. The capacity for sacrifice in the German soldiers in support of the ideal of Kultur was the outstanding surprise of the war. And that capacity was largely the result of the work of two men. Through the German educational system which they controlled, the psychology which carried the world into war in 1914 was created in the definite form of Kultur. These men were Adalbert Falk, Prussian Minister of Education until 1879, and the German Emperor William II. The agency through which these men produced this result was social heredity, the imposing of an ideal on the minds of the young under highly emotionalized conditions. Kultur, as a national ideal, was fixed in the minds of the young of Germany, beginning first in the elementary schools and extending on up through the 14 high schools and universities. The teachers and professors were forced to implant the ideal of Kultur in the minds of the students, and out of this teaching, in a single generation, grew the capacity for sacrifice of the individual for the interest of the nation, which surprised the modern world. As Benjamin Kidd so well stated the case, the aim of the state of Germany was everywhere to orientate public opinion through the heads of both its spiritual and temporal departments, through the bureaucracy, through the officers of the army, through the state direction of the press, and last of all, through the state direction of the entire trade and industry of the nation, so as to bring the idealism of the whole people to a conception of and to a support of the national policy of modem Germany. Germany controlled the press, the clergy, and the schools. Therefore, is it any wonder that she grew an army of soldiers during one generation, which represented to a man her ideal of Kultur? Is it any wonder that the German soldiers faced certain death with fearless impunity, when one stops to consider the fact that they had been taught from early childhood that this sacrifice was a rare privilege? Turn now from this brief description of the modus operandi through which Germany prepared her people for war to another strange phenomenon, Japan. No Western nation, with the exception of Germany, has so clearly manifested its understanding of the far-reaching influence of social heredity as has Japan. Within a single generation, Japan has advanced from her standing as a fourth-rate nation to the ranks of nations that are the recognized powers of the civilized. It takes but a second to administer a rebuke, but it may take a lifetime for the one who has been rebuked to forget it. Study Japan and you will find that she forces upon the minds of her young, through exactly the same agencies employed by Germany, the ideal of subordination of individual rights for the sake of accumulation of power by the nation. In all of her controversies with China, competent observers have seen that back of the apparent causes of the controversies was Japan's stealthy attempt to control the minds of the young by controlling the schools. If Japan could control the minds of the young of China, she could dominate that gigantic nation within one generation. If you would study the effect of social heredity as it is being used for the development of a national ideal by still another nation of the West, observe what has been going on in Russia since the ascendancy to power of the Soviet government of Russia, which is now patterning the minds of the young to conform with a national ideal, the nature of which it requires no master analyst to interpret. That ideal, when fully developed during the maturity of the present generation, will represent exactly that which the Soviet government wishes it to represent. Of all the flood of propaganda concerning the Soviet government of Russia that has been poured into this country through the tens of thousands of columns of newspaper space devoted to it since the close of the war, the following brief dispatch is by far the most significant. Russ Red's order books. Contracts being let in Germany for 20,000 volumes. Educational propaganda is aimed chiefly at children, by George Witz. 17. Special cable to the Chicago Daily News Foreign Service. Berlin, Germany, November 9, 1920. Contracts for printing 20,000 books in the Russian language, chiefly for children, are being placed in Germany on behalf of the Soviet government by Gershibin, a well-known Petrograd publisher and a friend of Maxim Gorky. Gershibin first went to England, but was received with indifference when he broached the subject to the British government. The Germans, however, not only welcomed him eagerly, but submitted prices so low that they could not possibly be underbidden in any other country. The Ullsteins, Berlin newspaper and book publishers, have agreed to print several million of the books at less than cost. This shows what is going on over there. Far from being shocked by this significant press dispatch, the majority of the newspapers of America did not publish it, and those that did give it space placed it in an obscure part of the paper in small type. Its real significance will become more apparent some 20-odd years from now, when the Soviet government of Russia will have grown an army of soldiers who will support, to the man, whatever national ideal the Soviet government sets up. The possibility of war exists as a stern reality today, solely because the principle of social heredity has not only been used as a sanctioning force in support of war, but it has actually been used as a chief agency through which the minds of men have been deliberately prepared for war. For evidence with which to support this statement, Examine any national or world history and observe how tactfully and 18 effectively war has been glorified and so described that it not only did not shock the mind of the student, but it actually established a plausible justification of war. Go into the public squares of our cities and observe the monuments that have been erected to the leaders of war. Observe the posture of these statues as they stand as living symbols to glorify men who did nothing more than lead armies on escapades of destruction. Notice how well these statues of warriors mounted on charging steeds serve as agencies through which to stimulate the minds of the young and prepare them for the acceptance of war, not only as a pardonable act, but as a distinctly desirable source of attainment of glory, fame, and honor. At the time of this writing, some well-meaning ladies are having the image of Confederate soldiers carved in the deathless granite on the face of Stone Mountain in Georgia in figures 100 feet tall, thus seeking to perpetuate the memory of a lost cause that never was a cause, and therefore the sooner forgotten, the better. If these references to faraway Russia, Japan, and Germany seem unimpressive and abstract, then let us study the principle of social heredity as it is now functioning on a highly developed scale here in the United States. For it may be expecting too much of the average of our race to suppose that they will be interested in that which is taking place outside of the spot of ground that is bounded on the north by Canada, on the east by the Atlantic, on the west by the Pacific, and on the south by Mexico. We, too, are setting up in the minds of our young a national ideal, and this ideal is being so effectively developed through the principle of social heredity, 19, that it has already become the dominating ideal of the nation. This ideal is the desire for wealth. The first question we ask about a new acquaintance is not, "Who are you?" but "What have you?" And the next question we ask is, "How can we get that which you have?" Our ideal is not measured in terms of warfare, but in terms of finance and industry and business. Our Patrick Henrys and our George Washingtons and our Abraham Lincoln of a few generations ago are now represented by the able leaders who manage our steel mills and our coal mines and our timberlands and our banking institutions and our railroads. We may deny this indictment if we choose, but the facts do not support the denial. The outstanding problem of the American people today is the spirit of unrest upon the part of the masses who find the struggle for existence becoming harder and harder because the most competent brains of the country are engaged in the highly competitive attempt to accumulate wealth and to control the wealth-producing machinery of the nation. It is not necessary to dwell at length upon this description of our dominating ideal or to offer evidence in support of its existence, for the reason that its existence is obvious and as well understood by the most ignorant as it is by those who make a pretense of thinking accurately. So deeply seated has this mad desire for money become that we are perfectly willing for the other nations of the world to cut themselves to pieces in warfare, so long as they do not interfere with our 20 scramble for wealth. Nor is this the saddest part of the indictment that we might render against ourselves, for we are not only willing for other nations to engage in warfare, but there is considerable reason to believe that those of us who profit by the sale of war supplies actually encourage this warfare among other nations. The plan, war grows out of the desire of the individual to gain advantage at the expense of his fellow men, and the smoldering embers of this desire are fanned into a flame through the grouping of these individuals who place the interests of the group above those of other groups. War cannot be stopped suddenly. It can be eliminated only by education, through the aid of the principle of subordination of the individual interests to the broader interests of the human race as a whole. Man's tendencies and activities, as we have already stated, grow out of two great forces. One is physical heredity, and the other is social heredity. Through physical heredity, man inherits those early tendencies to destroy his fellow man out of self-protection. This practice is a holdover from the age when the struggle for existence was so great that only the physically strong could survive. Gradually, men began to learn that the individual could survive under more favorable circumstances by allying himself with others, and out of that discovery grew our modern society, through which groups of people have formed states, and these groups, in turn, 21. Unfortunate, indeed, is the man who becomes so used to evil that it no longer appears to be horrible. 22. Have formed nations. There is but little tendency toward warfare between the individuals of a particular group or nation, for they have learned, through the principle of social heredity, that they can best survive by subordinating the interest of the individual to that of the group. Now, the problem is to extend this principle of grouping so that the nations of the world will subordinate their individual interests to those of the human race as a whole. This can be brought about only through the principle of social heredity, by forcing upon the minds of the young of all races the fact that war is horrible and does not serve either the interest of the individual engaging in it or the group to which the individual belongs. The question then arises, how can this be done? Before we answer this question, let us again define the term social heredity and find out what its possibilities are. Social heredity is the principle through which the young of the race absorb from their environment, and particularly from their earlier training by parents, teachers, and religious leaders, the beliefs and tendencies of the adults who dominate them. Any plan to abolish war to be successful depends upon the successful coordination of effort between all the churches and schools of the world for the avowed purpose of so fertilizing the minds of the young with the idea of abolishing war that the very word war will strike terror in their hearts. There is no other way of abolishing war. 23. The next question that arises, how can the churches and schools of the world be organized with this high ideal as an objective? The answer is that not all of them can be induced to enter into such an alliance at one time, but a sufficient number of the more influential ones can be induced, and this, in time, will lead or force the remainder into the alliance, as rapidly as public opinion begins to demand it. Then comes the question, who has sufficient influence to call a conference of the most powerful religious and educational leaders? The answer is the President and Congress of the United States. Such an undertaking would command the support of the press on a scale heretofore unheard of, and through this source alone, the propaganda would begin to reach and fertilize the minds of the people in every civilized country in the world, in preparation for the adoption of the plan in the churches and schools throughout the world. The plan for the abolition of war might be likened to a great dramatic play, with these as the chief factors. Stage setting at the Capitol of the United States. Star actors, the President and members of Congress. Minor actors, the leading clergymen of all denominations and the leading educators, all on the stage by invitation and at the expense of the United States government. Press room, representatives of the news-gathering agencies of the world. Stage equipment, a radio broadcasting outfit that 24 would distribute the entire proceedings halfway around the earth. Title of the play, Thou Shalt Not Kill. Object of the play, the creation of a world court, to be made up of representatives of all races, whose duty it would be to hear evidence and adjudicate the cases arising out of disagreement between nations. Other factors would enter into this great world drama, but they would be of minor importance. The main issues and the most essential factors are here enumerated. One other question remains. Who will start the machinery of the United States government into action to call this conference? And the answer is public opinion, through the aid of an able organizer and leader who will organize and direct the efforts of a Golden Rule Society, the object of which will be to move the President and Congress into action. No League of Nations and no mere agreement between nations can abolish war as long as there is the slightest evidence of sanction of war in the hearts of the people. Universal peace between nations will grow out of a movement that will be begun and carried on, at first, by a comparatively small number of thinkers. Gradually, this number will grow until it will be composed of the leading educators, clergymen, and publicists of the world. And these, in turn, will so deeply and permanently establish peace as a world ideal that it will become a reality. This desirable end may be attained in a single generation under the right sort of leadership, but more likely, it will not be attained for many generations to come, for the reason that those who 25 have the ability to assume this leadership are too busy in their pursuit of worldly wealth to make the necessary sacrifice for the good of generations yet unborn.